we will begin to speak about shadows that are even more important than transparency. They are so important because they create a 3D effect and they give a special atmosphere to the illustration. In particular, you have to consider that every city has a different kind of light and shadow. So this is a big help to speak about the city identity. We will speak also about the colors of shadows. It is always very important to consider. You will see why. Let's get to work now. With the shadows, we are able to describe the characteristic of the different material, the different geometric shapes and sizes of all the elements that are composing our scene. You will see how I will be able to describe through the shadows all the details of this very complicated and whimsical Baroque facade, and how the shadows will give us back all the incredible sunny character of Mexico City. Now, the first thing to consider when we begin to approach this subject is the direction of the sun ray, and so the way the sun is illuminating all the scene. I went several times to this place in order to realize the kind of light. I decided to choose one particular time during the day when the light is following more or less this direction, and so the projection of the building on the right is following this line. I go to consider among the layers creating this church building, the layer that is somehow closer to us, that is here. On all these church layers, I will create a new transparent layer. I turn from normal in multiply to make it transparent, and I call it church shadows. I enlarge it a little bit. This is the line to follow, and I begin on this new transparent layer to select a shape that is describing the direction of the shadow. This is only the first line that I do as a guide for all the other lines after this. This is passing also on the entrance, and it is illuminating also the street. In perspective, this will be more or less on the same line, but there it will go down. I always use this color for the shadow. Remember that shadows are never gray. Of course, as an artist, you are free to do what you want. You can do also red shadows, green shadows, blue shadows, everything. But normally the shadows are light blue. For example, if you consider white surface of snow, you go, for example, in internet now to see how is the color of the shadow, or which is the color of the shadow on the snow that is white, you will see that it's not gray. You can check in many photographs on the internet, but it's light blue. I have chosen for me kind of shadow that is between blue and green, because green is matching very well with this kind of color, red color, dark pink. If I click on this, I have immediately this beautiful shadow. If I want then to cut the shadow around, I can choose this polygonal lasso and cut it over there. You see how big is the contrast now of these other elements here. with shadow we create a new kind of contrast. It is not finished here, of course, because this kind of shadow is going also in the street. I project the shadow also on all these elements. You see, if I click now with the same color, I have all the street in shadow. Now that the whole street is in darkness, is in the shadows of these buildings, did you notice that all this plant here in foreground is less readable than before? The contrast is much less than the version without the shadow. So I decided to select the outline of the plant and I can try to color with a brilliant color that is already existing in this illustration and create a strongest contrast. But also I can create a much stronger contrast if I choose simply the white somewhere here. This is even more in contrast. I like this white also because white is not a natural color plant. This is even more interesting, a little bit more surreal. Now that we have adjusted this part, making this element in foreground more evident, we can consider the shadow on this building. So I select the building in foreground and I realize that since the building on this side are all more or less at the same level, and basing my vision on the photographs I made here on the site, I know that the shadow is following this line. I create another layer for the building shadow. It will be, of course, transparent, so I press multiply. I select this building. I choose inverse select. Now we have selected the entire building. And at this point, I go to building shadow. So I change the layer, but I maintain the same selection. And I begin with a brush, like this brush for example, a large brush, choosing the shadow color, I do my line. It's a little bit irregular and I begin to color all this part of the building on the building shadow layer, not on the building layer. I can even choose to make it faster, a bigger brush. You see, I decided to select the shape selection of the building, but now I went to work to another layer, the new shadow layer. I can paint this layer without going out from the outline of the building. I deselect this and I have a new situation because I can add shadows everywhere on this building. I make the brush smaller and I decide to keep the same angle of the shadow everywhere, following the ray of light or the sunlight angle. I color all these shadows also inside the window, the balcony door. I will apply the shadows also on these leaves, on this greenery up there. And what is most important now, going back in order to have a general view of our illustration that has really changed now a lot, is to apply carefully all these shadows on these reliefs, on all these sculptures. We can begin, for example, from the dome. We have the dome and we see on a rear layer here. We can create the dome layer. I deselect it, I save it, and you see that our illustration has changed. There is a stronger light compared with the previous illustration.